Hello, welcome to the mission briefing for Mission 1A, Terror Campaign, the Assault on Grayskull based narrative campaign. Terror Campaign is a mission portraying the attack by Imperial forces on a group of residential complexes that are suspected of being sympathetic to the Rebel Alliance. Basically, the Imperial Navy has been sent in to destroy this city center and make an example out of them. Meanwhile, the Rebel Alliance is sending forces to do the rebel thing and stop them and save the civilians. So, basically, what we have here is your basic 3x3. We have 6 container tokens that are going to be representing residential buildings. The first thing that you're going to do in this mission is actually place these in the play area. So you have 6 residential buildings that are going to go in the play area total. If you're playing on Vassal, just use the containers token, which you can find in the Pieces Missions tab. And if you're playing at home, hopefully you have container tokens. But if you don't have them, just use something similarly sized. They're about the size of a small ship base. So maybe you can just use empty ship bases instead. Or if you have little buildings, use those. That'd be awesome. Alright, so you will be placing one in each corner, like so, within range 2. So that's this little space here. Within means completely within range 2. So like this is not a legal placement, or this is not a legal placement. It has to sort of like all be completely within. Then you have 2 more to put in, and those are within range 3 of each edge and equidistant from the neutral table edges. So one goes there like that, and let's put the other one there like that. So this is basically how your table should look before you start deploying forces. Next up, you have the Imperial player has to deploy their squad. So let's get these ships ready here. The Imperials deploy first before the Rebels do, and they place all their ships within range 1 of their table edge. And this is basically the same way that you would deploy in a standard game, only you probably want to be setting yourself up for attack runs on these residential buildings. We'll get into why later on. Basically, you want to shoot them. After the Imperials deploy their ships, the Rebels get their turn to deploy, and they get to deploy within range 1 to 3 of their table edge. So let's actually bring out which little range ruler here. Right, so you just want to be within range 3 of your table edge. So if you're the Rebel player, you want to be thinking about your strategy in engaging the Imperials at that point. You want to bunch up, or you want to spread out. There's benefits and drawbacks to both of those strategies, but you want to consider that. Alright, let's move on to the mechanics of this mission. The Imperials also have initiative, so be aware of that. Alright, so here's how these residential buildings work. Basically, first we actually have to assign each of these some shield tokens. So these shield tokens represent the civilians that are in each of these towers. And we actually, how do you actually add this? Shift S, of course. Let's pump all these up to 3. Alright, so each shield token is one civilian. Alright, so let's get back to looking at how these residential buildings work. Basically, uh, in the combat phase, you can use your Imperial ships to attack a residential building pretty much as though it were a normal rebel ship. The only difference here is that basically whatever you're attacking it with, whether it's your primary weapon or your secondary weapon, turret, whatever, you roll the attack dice value for that weapon, but you never modify your dice. So let's say we have our little TIE fighter here with a focus token, and it rolls hit, focus, blank. What you can't do is change this to a hit. You can't spend your focus token. That's modifying dice. But fortunately for this TIE fighter, for every hit result that you roll, so that's hit results, not critical hit results, only hit results. If you roll at least one hit result, you get to remove one civilian token. And as the Imperial player, you remove that token and you put it in a special pile for yourself. So I guess we would, on Vassal, we would make our own little Imperial civilian tracker there. So they've got one from that. And basically how you get points in this match is by removing those civilian tokens, either as the Imperials by attacking these residential buildings, or as rebels, and we'll show you how to get those civilian tokens as rebels later. But basically you want to keep them alive and evacuate them. The other thing that happens to a residential building after you attack is it receives what we call a terror token, and we'll just represent that here with a stress token. And basically what this is going to do is this represents, the civilians being super scared, being under Imperial attack. They think they're all going to die. They're pretty much just, they're huddling in their apartments trying to, and they're just too scared to do anything. And that's bad for you as a rebel player because you want those civilians to evacuate. So a residential building can only have one of those at a time. So if you attack it multiple times with TIE fighters, it only gets one in total. And it doesn't matter if you actually removed that civilian token or not. So let's have let's imagine we attacked this building over here with this TIE fighter over here, and it didn't actually get a hit. So it rolled, 3 eyeballs or something, or 3 critical hits. It didn't pull off any civilian tokens. This container, this residential building, still gets a terror token because the civilians are still scared because they got attacked. Basically, the only other ways that there's one other way for you to take civilian tokens off as the Imperial, and that's basically by using a bomb. Bombs affect these much like a rebel ship. So if you drop a cluster mine, a set of cluster mines on it, the cluster mines detonate, and if you roll a hit with those cluster mines, then you will take one civilian token off. Right. So, what do these terror tokens mean for the rebels? At the end of each round, the rebel players get to remove they get to remove 2 civilian tokens. They can't remove both from one building, so you have to remove, one from 2 different buildings, right? So like one from here, one from here. What you can't do is go ahead and remove both from one building. It has to be two separate buildings. But you do that for free. You don't need to have your ships nearby. The only restriction is if the building has a terror token, then you can't remove any civilian tokens from it as the rebel player. So that's evacuation of civilians. That's how the rebels get their civilian tokens. And the only problem is these terror tokens. Otherwise, you'd be pulling those civilian tokens off every turn. The civilian tokens are worth 10 points at the end of the game. So you get, pretty much as a rebel player, you get 20 points free every round that you're pulling off civilian tokens. But if there's these terror tokens everywhere, then it might be hard for you to pull off civilian tokens to evacuate those civilians. So what you can do as the rebel player to deal with these terror tokens, there's two ways you can do it. Two ways you can remove a terror token from a residential building. The first way is if you end the turn. If one of your rebel ships ends its turn within range 1 or at range 1 of any building with a terror token, you can go ahead and remove that terror token. The other way is if you are, let's move these guys a little further back. So we remove this terror token just by being close to that building. The civilians are, happy that there's a rebel ship nearby. They feel a little protected, and they are going to make their getaway. Now in this situation, we're not at range 1 of this building, but the rebels still want to try and pull a civilian token off of that because it's going to get attacked again. The other thing that they can do to remove a terror token, the other thing that civilians like to see, is if your rebel ships, put that back on there. If your rebel ships attack and destroy a Imperial ship, if that Imperial ship is at range 1 to 3 of a residential building with a terror token, you can go ahead and remove that terror token. The civilians are very happy to see you blowing Imperial ships out of the sky, and they will go ahead and start evacuating again for you. Now the timing is a little important on that. The timing for the terror tokens coming off just by your ships being close, that happens at the end of the turn, at the end of the end phase. But if you blow up an Imperial ship, that's an immediate effect. That token comes off right away as soon as you destroy the ship. So the reason that is important is because the rebels evacuate the civilians at the start of the end phase of every round. So if we go back to our scenario where this TIE fighter is being destroyed, then the result is that this stress token, this terror token, comes off immediately. And then at the end of the turn, we would be able to, as a rebel player, evacuate the civilian and take that and add it to our own pile. On the other hand, we would not be able to evacuate any civilians from this building because it still has a terror token, even though it's going to come off at the end of the end phase, because we evacuate at the start and we remove terror tokens from being nearby at the end of the end phase. So try and keep track of that one. Now, the other things that are new or different to Grayskull narratives missions and different from your traditional mission. One major thing is that not only do you score points for destroying enemy ships, You also lose points for ships that you have lost. So if you're the Imperial player here and you get some TIE fighters blown up, so let's say this TIE fighter gets blown up here, the points from this TIE fighter are going to be subtracted from your total as the Imperial player, and they're going to be added to the Rebel total. So blowing up a TIE fighter in this narrative is a swing of 24 points. So keep that in mind. The other big difference here is that under most circumstances, flying off the board edge does not actually yield points, your ship does not count as destroyed. So let's say, it's late in the game, we've been dogfighting for a while, and we have this X-Wing here is down to its last shield or whatever it wants, and it's surrounded by TIE fighters, uh, and it's about to be destroyed. What you can do as a rebel player here is actually fly yourself right off the board, and in the late game, this will not count as destroyed. You might notice I'm saying in the late game, because we do have some anti-cowardice rules here. Both the Rebel Command and the Imperial Navy don't like it if you show up for a fight and then run away immediately. So the rules for this are if you flee the battle before the third activation phase. So let's say this is activation phase 1. We go one forward. Activation phase 2, up, running away. In this case, the Imperial player will score points equal to the cost of this X-Wing. So you won't lose points as the Rebel, but the Imperial will gain points. So they'll gain, like whatever, 21 points for this. So you're handing points to the enemy, in addition to whatever objective points they're going to score because you're not around. So it's not recommended to run away early, but it could be in your advantage to run away in the late game. In fact, it's very, very often recommended, especially because a lot of these missions will have asymmetric point values for each side. So, for example, here the Imperial player has 110 points to spend on their squad, and the Rebel player has 100 points to spend on their squad. So if you make it to the end game and all the civilian tokens have been taken off by the Imperial players and the Rebel player, and you're facing the full Imperial squad with a full Rebel squad, you probably want to run with your Rebel squad. Because at that point you won't be yielding any points to the enemy, but staying to fight is probably not a good idea because you're outmatched. Alright, so that is basically it for Mission 1A. The last thing I have here is just a bit of what I'm calling the intel reports, just a little bit of advice. So as the Rebel player, you want to be aware that the Imperials have numerical advantage on you. They have a 10 squad point advantage on you, basically. But they're under pressure to attack these residential buildings, whereas your mechanism for evacuating civilians is basically automatic every turn. You don't have to be, you're not going to be attacking these buildings. You're free to attack these Imperial starfighters. So you want to make sure that you take favorable engagements. Take advantage of your order in the deployment. You deploy second, so try to use that to your advantage. If you feel like the Imperials are spoiling for a dogfight, maybe think twice about that because they have a 10 squad point advantage on you. But on the other hand, if they're spread out, maybe you want to try and pick off a few of their starfighters while they are focusing on residential towers. And basically the opposite goes for the Imperials. Try not to make yourself too much of a target in the early game. Try to be, be ready to react to a rebel concentrated deployment. If the rebels try and fight you head on like this, it's very possible for you to punish them if you can concentrate your forces. On the other hand, uh, it's also it can be very easy for you to pull off more civilian tokens than the rebels can. Because if we just think about it, if we have like 110 points of TIE fighters, you could be rolling upwards of I don't know, at least uh, 24 dice or so if you're making range one attacks. So you're probably going to pull off a lot of civilian tokens in that first round and putting a lot of terror tokens on the board. So you definitely have some opportunities there to bag a lot of points. Just be careful that you don't leave yourself too open to attack. All right, so that's mission 1A. Good luck.